Hello and welcome to another episode of the Digital Access Show. No, I'm not using any other languages today because right now I think I'm all languaged out. So this week I've got a guest that I first met at a conference. We were introduced by a mutual friend, the lovely Shannon Towle from Shannon Towle Design. And Patrick really impressed me with how he goes about his work and also his consideration for others. So, everyone, I'd like you to meet Patrick Lane. Patrick, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you. It's fantastic to be here.
Patrick, can you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Absolutely. So I am deaf in both ears with bilateral cochlear implants and been deaf or hard of hearing since birth. And myself, I am an experienced designer and I currently work for Wong Duty, a creative agency under Infosys. And I mostly focus on improving the user experience for digital application, whether that be a website, an app, or any digital platform. One of my biggest passion is accessibility, and that's why I'm really happy to be here today.
Yeah. Why digital accessibility? Why is it your passion?
Because I've had so many barriers growing up where I just didn't have the access to the language that I need or to the
Mm.
information I need. So even though I grew up with access to the English language and I had an education in the English language, spoken and written, it got to a point where I became an Auslan user, so Australian Sign Language user, when I was 18 and have
Mm.
been since then. So I have the opportunity to choose what language I want to access. And so when I'm online, oftentimes I don't have the opportunity to get the information I need. So, for example, if I'm at a train station and all of a sudden the system's out and I can't rely on the information on the screens because it's not showing, it actually comes up with the words listen to announcement. And I dread that every single time I see it because I might have had a full day of back-to-back meetings and I just wanted to switch off my cochlear implants because I do get quite a bit of a headache if I'm constantly listening all the time. So I didn't have access to language. And even if I did have to put my cochlear implants back on, I would really struggle to understand what's been said over the announcement because of the other white noise and general noise in the background
Yeah,
of other trains or people talking, people foot movement and whatnot.
yeah.
So that adds a lot of stress and unnecessary stress to my journey. So I can only imagine just how much other fiction experiences other people have around the world, not just for the deaf and hard of hearing, but also people with vision impairment and other well
People on
even,
the spectrum, the
no,
ASD
exactly.
spectrum, they have a massive issue.
Exactly, and the list goes on and on. And
Yeah.
I have a background in industrial design as well, so I've always had a passion for the accessibility in a physical space too. So people who are in wheelchairs or people with cerebral palsy and can't, uh, they need to be able to hold on to things just in case they feel like they're going to fall. So being able to give confidence and to everyone with these needs to be able to go about their day with independently is just so vital. And in fact, it is actually our right.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with you there. It is our right. Patrick, we've been focusing on what usable digital communication is over the last few episodes. What to you is usable digital communication?
Usable digital communication at its core is really being concise and to the point.
Mm.
It's being able to provide people with the ability to go onto a website or an app and access information or explore the information on the app or website with ease. So an example of this is the classic 3-33 rule, where you want to be able to capture someone's attention in 3 seconds
Yeah.
with very simple visualization, very simple compelling headlines,
Mhm.
or headings or whatnot. But then the next step is 30 seconds, engage them as much as you can. But even in that, that is actually the most vital point. You want to be able to have very simple language used so that even people with a reading level of a year 9 level in education can
Yep.
actually read and understand what's being said. Everything's laid out in the appropriate hierarchy, so making sure the important information is at the top and working your way down. There's many other things I could
Mm.
elaborate on, but essentially at its core is the ability to be concise, to the point, and engage people at, as soon as possible.
Mm. One of the biggest problems I strike, and it does frustrate me at times, is the amount of words people use at times. They just go on and on instead of focusing on what the point is, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. And I see this all the time. And it's even though some people want to, this is just an assumption of mine, but
Mm.
even though people would like to express their knowledge of the English language, or
Mm.
any language for that matter, and really have nice big bulky paragraphs, it actually ends up being a backfire because you are giving them more time to read and much more of a cognitive load to digest information, process it, understand its contents, the context of it,
Mm.
and then they have to make a decision from there whether they want to continue reading or act on the information that they just read. So it is really quite frustrating as well, and especially from my standpoint as a deaf person in terms of my culture. Even though I've had the luxury of having education in the English language, there are a lot of people in the deaf community who have had Auslan as their first language, and much to people's beliefs, Auslan is actually not an English language. It is a visual language. There is no written component to Auslan. So when you think about sign language at its core, it's a visual language. You're creating visual signs, whether it's a facial expression, you're
Mm.
using your hand, using your body to tell a story. There are no written components to that. And as a result, the English language, written and both spoken, is predominantly our second language.
Mm.
So therefore, as a result, when you have deaf people coming onto websites who predominantly only use Auslan, and you are relying on them to use their knowledge of the second language to understand the content on a website. So if the content is not short and sweet, to the point, using bullet points, or you're not leveraging visual assets to tell the story of what the website or the purpose of the visual asset trying to convey, then you are going to lose them, unfortunately.
Wow. I'd never thought of Auslan being a visual language, but it makes sense. With Auslan, can you explain a bit more about Auslan and how you use Auslan and why going from that to a website is an issue?
Absolutely. So, sign language has been used for many thousands of years, and we have over 300 different sign languages around the world, and Auslan is one of them. So, Auslan is the language for Australia, and it's our way of communicating between deaf person to another deaf person or a hearing person who also knows Auslan. And because we cannot talk, a lot of deaf people don't know, may not have the skill to be able to talk or have been taught how to. Therefore, their only method of communication is via Auslan. And so everyone is different. It's a beautiful, diverse community of deaf and hard of hearing people. So some do talk, but they don't sound as fluent in the English spoken language,
Yep.
whereas others, like myself, we are a little bit more fluent. Um, so it's quite a beautiful, diverse community. And but at its core, Auslan is how we connect.
Yeah.
And when it comes to websites, Everything there is in English, and for those who predominantly use Auslan, and for the sake of this conversation, they have very limited knowledge of the English language and the English grammar as
Mm.
well. When they read content, they have to exert much more energy to really understand what's being read. Therefore, as a result, they can get quite tired quite quickly, and they always look for any accessibility offerings on the website. So if there is an Auslan interpretation video, they will go to that straight away without fail. Unfortunately, Auslan translation is considered a AAA standard in the WCAG guidelines, which is understandable because it is quite expensive, can be quite expensive to do. Whereas if you change a paragraph on a website, you have to complete that video all over again. Uh, and it can be quite costly because to get an interpreter on to read the content of the website, understand what the website is trying to convey, and then the interpreter has to interpret that. They don't interpret word for word. They actually explain in Auslan what the content, the overall gist of that
Mhm.
information trying to convey. Um, they do also struggle when there's a transcript too, even though they do appreciate a transcript of a video, um, it's still written in English,
Yeah.
and they still may struggle with that as well. That's why I also advise people to have captions too on all video content. Just without fail, have that as your default. Even if even having it on there, so users would have to turn off. But there's been studies through Netflix even where I think it was in the 70% percentile that their users use subtitles, and that's including hearing people, and that's millions and millions and millions of users. And even
Yeah.
today, you go on a train, people are scrolling on the social media, and all of the videos are captioned, and they love that because they don't have to listen to the audio; they can just rely on the captions. So it is becomes a no-brainer that if we can actually apply that to videos, to websites, and be the default and have them turned on by default, then that will definitely help the deaf community and hard of hearing community drastically. Sorry.
Captions. What is a good caption? What is a bad caption?
Great question. So a good caption is a boring caption. So what I mean by that is a great caption is one that's very simple with a black background, white text, white readable text of the appropriate size. So it's not
Mm.
too small to read, not too large, that is interfering with the video. So just a nice sweet spot in the middle and readable content, readable font. A lot
Mm.
of content out there, they try to be flashy about it with showing one word at a time, doing different colors, making it throw in your face. It's it's engaging, yes. However, the problem with that is you are focusing more on the subtitles than you are on the content of the video.
Mm.
One of the things that I find is people underestimate the power of your peripheral vision. So what I find myself when I look at captions is even though I have captions on my screen right now, I'm able to very quickly use my peripheral vision to sort of quickly jump between looking at you and looking at the captions. And whether I might get to a point where I didn't quite understand what you just said, I'll quickly focus on the captions because I rely on my peripheral vision to sort of guide me on where the captions are at in terms of the pace. And so the more people are used to captions, the simple ones, the much more likely that much more likely, sorry, the likelihood of them being able to be more engaged in the video content itself. So the captions are purely there as an additive tool, not part of the video.
A lot of business today use the AI captioning. What's your
Yes.
thoughts?
So AI captions, Just to a certain degree, they do a portion of the heavy work, but it all relies on the quality of the audio, the quality of the language that's been spoken, and the knowledge of the machine learning behind the AI itself. So let's say, for example, the AI has been um, developed in India, and therefore they're bringing it to Australia for Australian users. But the machine learning around that has been most predominantly used in India, so their language. We bring it to here, therefore it requires more time to understand our language and our slangs, our jargons, our way of speaking, our tone of voice, and that requires a lot more time, and therefore there are bound to be a lot of mistakes in the captioning itself, and therefore that requires a lot more fixing, manual fixing, manual refinement on our part to make sure that they are correct. Now the interesting part is, does that take up more time for us to manually go in and check and fix everything? Or is it easier for us to just manually do the whole thing ourselves in terms of time, effort, and attention? So there is benefits in long term with AI in captioning, but I do feel that we are in a bit of an immature state at the moment to rely on it too much. That's my opinion on it.
Mm. So when we look at brevity and
Yes.
considering what we've discussed so far, brevity is such an important principle for communication, isn't it?
It really is. With anything in life, really. And that's actually one of the beautiful things about Auslan, because Auslan is built around brevity. It's, it's you ask people, how do I sign this in the most simple way possible that people understand what I'm trying to say? So, for example, I would say, oh, I'm going to the shop now, see you soon.
Mm.
In Auslan, it'll be shop, I go back soon.
Yeah,
So it's very, very short, and the grammar is a bit different as well. So in terms
yeah,
of the general scheme of things, yes, I agree, and I think it's we as a society have been conditioned to be naturally time poor, have a
mhm,
very small attention span, and we have so much content that we're absorbing all the time, every day, that no wonder no one has much energy at the end of the day to give. And I find that if we are able to really focus on having effective communication strategies moving forward from the start, we're able to provide very concise, clear information, whether it's verbal in person or down in paper in the form of a letter, PDFs, reports,
yeah,
or even on digital platforms to really, and even visually too. It goes also go to visualizations as well and graphics and whatnot. If we
mm.
can keep it really simple and to the point and logical as well, then I feel like as a society, we would generally be in a much happier place, I feel, and being able to get things done a lot much more quickly.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you because I often think that if people are using too many words, it really does take away from that main point of what they're trying to say. Yeah, interesting. It's Patrick, what's a takeaway that you could give to everyone about brevity, about Auslan captioning, web design, digital accessibility?
Well, the biggest one, first of all, is be strategic about it. So make sure you have all your considerations up front, and whether you may not have specifically for web development, if you don't have the funding or the capabilities to adopt all of the accessibility strategies straight away, at least have a plan in place to build a foundation in order to do so. Because the amount of what we call tech debt, or in other words, extra work that we have to do down the end to include these accessibility features is astronomical, and it's it requires so much more money, so much more complexity, and it adds more complexity to the coding of websites. And it can actually be a nightmare, or especially for screen readers, to not having the coding there in the first place to easily go through, okay, this is heading one, this is heading two, this is the content, this is the alt text for these images. Not having that there in the first place and to add in like, oh, yeah.
Mm.
So it really comes down to planning. So if you plan it properly, doesn't matter if you go from 0 to 10 when you want to go from 0 to 100. But if 0 to 100 is your 3-year plan, fantastic. Have a plan, a 3-year plan, and have your milestones on how you're going to achieve every step to get there. And hold yourself accountable. Have key metrics that would help measure and test that you are actually achieving those targets um, as you go along through that journey. And I mean, I could talk about all the simple stuff like keep things short. I could talk about using simple language, avoid jargons and slangs as well.
Yep.
Avoid that. Um, um, I'll also talk about simplifying navigation of websites as well.
Yep.
However, it does get to a point where the more you simplify it, the higher the risk of that navigation flow no longer becomes logical.
Mm.
So it's very important, I find, to plan and have a really good information architecture. So how information is flown, how people go from one part of the website to another, and making sure it's logical and makes sense. And the language that you use to title those um, pages or those elements of the website is very clear and to the point.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, test. Just test as much as you
Oh,
can. I'm a huge advocate for collaboration and making sure that you have all the right people in the team to achieve the best result possible. So if you have the opportunity to test with someone who has a disability, fantastic, do it. No matter how brief of interaction that might be, you will get so much more out of that than any kind of AI tool that might be able to do it for you.
mm.
Um, and yeah, definitely leverage as much support you can from accessibility experts. So whether you have within the company or you need to leverage someone digital agency outside.
Yep.
There are there's quite a few in Australia, as you know, Noel, who are willing to support.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick. Patrick, how can people contact you to keep the conversation going?
Oh, easy. I think reach out to me on LinkedIn if they like,
Mhm.
or by email too, which I think is on LinkedIn too. So we're happy to reach out that way.
Fantastic. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for being on our show today. So that's another episode of Digital Access Show. If you want to follow us, we'd love it. Like, share, subscribe. If you know of other people you think, oh, look, we'd like to hear what they've got to say about digital accessibility. Every point is important because we are all part of the one society. And everyone in society needs to be able to communicate, not just one group. Everyone communicates differently, and that's fine. That's good. So let me know if you know of anyone. So I'm Narelle, and let's see you next time. Thank you.